My name is Sean and I'm delighted you're joining us for today's ESPC community webinar. Today I'm joined by Lindsay Shelton, MVP, who will cover From Zero to Governance Hero, how I built Power Platform governance from scratch. We love hearing you guys how to say it, so remember to join conversation about today's webinar and more on X. Our handle is at ESPC underscore community and our hashtag is hashtag EPPC26. Tweet us, tag us, and tell us what you learned. Don't forget to check out our Learning Hub, which updates the latest blogs, ebooks, webinars, and how-to videos. You can access and view the Learning Hub by visiting our website, sharepointeurope.com, and clicking Content tab at the top. Join us for our next webinar, Full Power, Power App Optimization, with Keith Atherton, MVP. This will be happening tomorrow, February 10th at 11 a.m. CET as part of Power Platform Week. Don't miss out and register today at www.sharepointeurope.com/Microsoft Power Platform Week. During Power Platform Week, we've got a special opportunity for you as part of the community experience. You can get €150 off tickets to EPPC 26 in Copenhagen, Europe's leading Power Platform conference packed with keynotes, workshops, and networking. This offer is valid only until the 18th of February and applies to new ticket purchases only. So don't miss out. Scan the QR code and use code PPWeek to secure your ticket today. After the webinar, we'll have a questions and answers session. Type any questions you might have into the chat box. Questions will be selected and answered at the end of the presentation. This webinar will be recorded and added to the Resource Center, where you'll be notified by email when it's available. And now I'm going to pass you over to today's webinar presenter. Hello, Lindsay. Thanks for joining us today.
All right. Hello, hello. Go ahead and share my screen here. All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. For me, it is 9 a.m. So it's a little early, but I've got some Diet Coke jazzed up and ready to go. Today, we are going to talk about Power Platform governance and just real basics, because and there's a story component to all of this. So I'll start by introducing myself. And this QR code goes to my link tree. So if you want to connect with me, reach out, etc., QR code goes there, the URL goes there, there's my email, all that good stuff. Just have to spell my name right is the only kicker. I am from the US. I'm born and raised in Kansas City. I'm a big Kansas City Chiefs fan. So even I ignored the Super Bowl last night because we weren't in it for once. So was a little bitter about that, but it's all right. We'll get him next year. I am a really proud cat mom, so you might see Charlie or Trixie make an appearance. It's hard to say. I am a business applications and so Power Automate and Microsoft 365 Copilot MVP. I'm an MCT alumni, and oh, I see we've got someone from Springfield. Yeah, I was just there for the halftime show and having a good time. Fun fact, I can get distracted easily, but that's okay because I can get right back on track because I spent 10 years as a middle school teacher. So as long as no one starts throwing things at the screen or even if you start, just losing it in the chat, it probably won't faze me because 10 years of teaching 10-year-olds to 13, 14-year-olds will really prepare you for everything. Uh, and my hobbies include staring at my cats and watching Bravo reality television and being an expert on that. So feel free to connect with me if you if those things interest you as well. And my current role is I'm a digital workplace advisor. My boss came up with that title on Copilot, which he's very proud of. And what I do is I'm responsible for Microsoft 365 adoption and training across a global legal services org. So I spend a lot of my day talking about Copilot, but I've been getting to dabble in some Power Platform governance again. So always enjoy that. All right. So we are going to talk about kind of the story that inspired this session. We will talk about what I consider to be the 4 pillars of Power Platform governance. So that would be environment, DLP policies, security roles, which we will not talk about extensively because that is my Achilles heel, and the Center of Excellence Starter Kit. Though you could also obviously use managed environments, but as you'll see in my little story here, we went the cheap route. And then we'll throw in some tips and tricks, and then I'll be happy to answer questions, or at least try to answer questions at the end. So flashback to September 2022, and I went to the first Microsoft Power Platform conference, they called it at the time, in Orlando. And I didn't really know the Power Platform very well. I just kind of took a chance and decided to go because I wanted to learn it. I had been, more focused in the SharePoint space, things like that. And I came back and had fallen in love with Power Automate, especially. And I said, oh my gosh, we're going to automate all of the things at my org. It's going to be so awesome. Everything's going to be so cool. And then flashback to October 2022, where I log into my work laptop and I do a little bit of research, and I react in horror because I realize by default, if you didn't know this, there's no governance in place for the Power Platform. People can do pretty much whatever they want by default. And that was kind of terrifying to me. So you're going to hear this. Listen, Matt Devaney might think he has the cat market cornered, but I'm working my way in. So you're gonna see some annoying memes, and you're gonna hear this word a lot, governance. So I'm a millennial, so you're also gonna see some 90s memes here. And we're going to start with what is a zero state of governance, which is what I considered us to have, and I consider a lot of different orgs, if you've not touched it, to have. So a zero state of governance, your main risks are shadow IT. You could have power users creating mission critical apps and flows that you have no insight into, control over, of awareness of. There could be excessive consumption of licenses. There could be a mess, especially in the default environment. Users who leaving orphaned flows and apps behind. There could be wild creation of environments and apps depending on who is touched and configured what settings. And then the big one, obviously, is security concerns, because you could have your company information leaking through the Power Automate or Power Apps, and if you've deemed yourself in charge of the Power Platform at your org, then that's not great, obviously. So there could be unvetted connectors that people are sending out information to. Craig White has a great example that I won't share in this presentation, but basically someone is using an HTTP connector to connect to a pretty inappropriate website with their work computer that he discovered with an actual client. So yeah, people could be accessing things that you don't want them to access at work. So my story is I was working at the time at a medical research nonprofit named the Stowers Institute for Medical Research. We had about 600-ish users, and the thing that saved my org, at least, was we had low-ish Microsoft adoption for a variety of reasons that I won't get into. They were somewhat Microsoft reluctant, I guess is the polite way to say that. And so what was going on at Stowers, once I got home and I dug in and started trying to figure out what was the lay of the land. And so the biggest problem we ended up having was shadow IT. So we had a power user who I installed the COE starter kit, which we'll get to, and figured out, oh, we have a power user who's created a ton of apps and flows. And then he was leaving the org. And I said, hey, do you need any help offboarding your stuff? And he said, nope, I'm good. I got it. And that was not true. So I definitely needed to step in. I was luckily had timed my little governance initiative very well, that I was able to get access to his apps and flows and help reshare them and get them set up with the service account and all that good stuff. Because yeah, people are going to just leave and not offboard their stuff properly. It's just what some people are going to do. Luckily, due to low adoption, we didn't have a huge mess to clean up in the default environment, but there were a handful of orphaned apps and flows, which are just apps and flows where the owner has left the org and no longer they no longer have an owner, but they could still be running. And then luckily there were no leaks that we found out about, or at least that I was aware of. Though again, that was probably saved by low adoption in that case, which you might, it's a double-edged sword, right? If you have adoption, that's awesome, that's exciting, but you also, if you have no governance in place, could really need this webinar. So, where do you go when there is nothing in place? The good news is you can go anywhere you want. You can set up your governance strategy to be what you want it to be. So, that is at least the nice thing about looking at the bright side of things, there being no governance in place by default, because you get to set it up however you want. So if any of you are children of the 90s, and I don't know if this is too much of a US reference or not, but Pimp My Ride, we're going to put some governance in your governance, and then governance your governance. We're going to governance all the things. Now, how I got started was honestly the Microsoft community, and people in the community like I'm doing right now, who were able and willing to help me learn about Power Platform governance, things like the COE starter kit, DLP policies. So I will always give a big shout out to Michael Roth and Craig White, who are just amazing resources and really, really helpful. Twitter was a really huge source of help for me at that time. I don't know what quite's going on there anymore, and I also refuse to call it anything but Twitter. But you've got LinkedIn to go to now, at least. And then Microsoft Learn was actually a pretty good resource for me as well. But the biggest source of help was just, like I said, the community in general. So don't be afraid to ask for help from other people. Now, do it in small doses, ask for reasonable amounts of help. You're not trying to bring in a consultant. You're unless you are, in which case I know some people. But if you're just trying to, like me, I was working for a nonprofit. I was just trying to figure out, how do I get something in place? And so you're not a burden. People want to help you. And then once you've been helped, the main thing is just pay it forward. And so that's why I like to do this session and this webinar, is because I'm trying to pay forward the things that people like Michael and Craig and also Louis Beba helped me and taught me about Power Platform governance. So even though this is what it felt like when the community was coming in trying to help me, it really wasn't this bad, but it might feel like this for you. My basic governance philosophy, it boils down to a couple bullet points here. After governance is in place, then you start working on the adoption piece, which is now what I'm really passionate about and working about and happy to talk about. But you empower your users to create by having those guardrails in place. I recommend allowing your dedicated and trained makers a little bit more freedom with your DLP policies, which we'll get to. But I had a maker community at Stowers of people who had gone through trainings with me about Power Automate and Power Apps, and then they got a little less restrictive data loss prevention policies as a reward. Develop relationships along those lines with your power users because they can become your evangelists, they can become your champions. I have a co-pilot champions community currently that it really is one of my highlights of my week every week when we meet. And if I was more in charge of the power platform at my current role, then I would be having a power platform champions call as well. Because you really, sometimes if you're working in IT, it's hard to understand all of the business problems fully. I know it is for me working at a legal services org because that's not my background at all. And so it really helps for me to have this relationship with my power users so that I can learn what will help the business. And users can't break anything too badly or screw anything up too badly if you've got the good governance in place, but be better safe than sorry. So we are going to go into the 4 pillars of governance, at least as I view them. I would say one of these cans of Four Loko that this Chihuahua is standing on could also be managed environments, but this is the cheap version, like I said. So we've got environments, data loss prevention policies, security roles, and then I'm mostly going to focus on the Center of Excellence starter kit. So environments, if you are not familiar, they are basically containers within the Power Platform. They're a space where you can store and you manage your data, your apps, your flows, and keep them separate from each other and have different sets of rules in place for, based on the environment that you've got. So they're basically just big boxes. And again, no, I'm not coming for Matt Devaney. I am up there with Matt Devaney because I am the cat lady. So there we go. Uh, love Matt Devaney. So nice. So Canadian. So nice. So there's a couple of different ways that you can set up your environment strategy. The one you're always going to have to deal with that you cannot delete is the default environment. So in all of these box examples that I'm going to give you, you've got to consider the default environment in your environment strategy. But maybe you decide, I want to create these containers or these boxes for departments. So I say, okay, HR gets a box, IT gets a box, finance gets a box, or an environment. You could also choose to do it regionally. So that can be especially good with things like GDPR and other data privacy considerations that maybe if you've got people in Europe, for example, that, have different regulations than people in the US, you might want to put those things in separate environments. Or you can do a application lifecycle management approach where you've got a dev, a test, and a prod. So you start in dev, you play around in dev. Once you feel confident with it, or at least reasonably confident with it, you move it into UAT or testing, and then it moves into production. And what I recommend, really, depending on the size of your org, is a combination of these things. So, for example, at my org, we've got 5,000 to 7,000 users, depending on the day. But we have, for example, corporate finance has a dev, a test, and a prod environment. So we've got it separated out by both the organization, the business unit, and we give them those application lifecycle management environments as well. So there's a couple different environment types to consider when you are setting up an environment. One of the ones that I use the least, I would say, would be your Dataverse for Teams environment. It's kind of a mini database. You can set it up right within Teams. It's basically a simplified version of the full Dataverse capabilities that you can have. But again, this one's a little more niche. I know there's use cases for it. I just don't really typically use it. Developer environments are great, especially if you can afford managed environments and environment routing and all of that stuff. It's a great place for individual developers to work on and build things. But keep in mind, if you created a developer environment, it's intended for use only by the owner, meaning I can't assign a security group to it. I can't share things out from it. I have to instead import or export it or use a pipeline to get things out of it in order to get it into an environment where I can share that solution with other people. We have production environments. So those are intended for your things that are going to be permanent or mostly permanent, important business critical solutions. And then we've got sandbox environments, which are very similar to production environments. They just run a little slower than a production environment. I recommend those for your dev and your test kind of environments if your dev environment needs multiple devs working on the same thing, which it might. And then you've got trial environments, which are just 30 days short-term testing, things that can be spun up, and they are limited to one per user. And then, of course, you have the default environment, which we will get to. So this is a Craig White graphic, but consider your t-shirt sizing when you are considering how many environments do I build, because you don't want to build 50 million environments, because then you've got to keep track of 50 million environments and manage 50 million environments. And you don't necessarily want to do that, but you do want enough environments. But there's no one right answer. You know, the famous consultant answer, it depends how many environments you need. So if the solution is just a personal solution, you know, something for personal productivity, just have people put it generally in the default environment or their own personal dev environment. Things that are team-based, that are just one, you know, maybe if there's a team of 10, 15 people, maybe spin them up just one team environment if it's a small solution that just one team is relying on, but that then they can get their own dedicated security roles and groups. If you've got department-wide solutions, consider maybe giving them a dev, UAT, and production. If it's an organization-wide solution, then I definitely recommend having a dev, UAT, or test and prod. And then your really high-value ones for your organization, your mission critical, business critical, org-wide solutions, you might want even 4 environments for it. So a dev environment, a QA environment, a user acceptance testing environment, and then a production environment. So just depends on the size of the solution. Now, we'll talk about the elephant in the room, which is the default environment. You cannot delete it. You cannot back it up. You cannot properly restore it. So it's complicated, you know. The recommendation from Microsoft has been to rename it, because right now in your environment, if in your tenant, if you haven't touched it, it's going to be called your org's name parentheses default. And that can be misleading for users, because if they see the word default, they think, oh, this is where I should build everything, which is not necessarily the case for a variety of reasons. So in our org, we have it renamed to personal productivity. There's other different recommendations for what to name it, but just so that users know it's not a private locked down environment. It's kind of the wild, wild west. Unless you use a strict DLP or data loss prevention policy on your default environment, which is what I recommend, because everyone has access to it. So I personally recommend, and we'll get to DLP policies next, locking it down to like just your Microsoft non-blockable connectors, honestly. And then in the default environment, this one can be a little more arduous depending on your level of adoption before you've gone in and done the governance, but you can use the COE starter kit to help you clean up orphaned and inactive flows and apps. And that also can allow you, this is what one of the things that I used it for, to identify flows and apps that are becoming popular to the point that they would be considered mission critical, that you want to probably talk to those makers about moving it into a dedicated environment. All right, so that is environments, everything you could want to know, not everything you could want to know about, a lot of things that you could want to know about environments. We are going to, and feel free to throw questions in the chat and I can get to them at the end, but we are going to hop to DLP, or data loss prevention policies now. So they are rules that you can set up that block or permit certain data connectors, like Microsoft, like Salesforce, like Twitter, like Google Drive, like the HTTP connector, all sorts of things. You can set up new connectors to be blocked by default. I do recommend this in the majority of your environments because there are new independently published connectors that come out every day. And it's just not reasonable to think that you're going to keep on top of checking and then vetting every single new one. So it's more of a let people ask for it sort of approach is what I would recommend, versus just give everyone all the new connectors they could possibly want, and what could possibly go wrong, right? You can also govern which connectors can be used together in an app or flow. DLP policies can be configured for one environment. So I mentioned I had a maker, a dedicated trained maker environment that had its own DLP policy that was just a little more permissive. They can be configured for groups of environments, or they can be configured for the whole org, though I wouldn't necessarily recommend going to a whole org DLP policy. We came up with a tenant block list at my current org with just set, like the things that we know we don't want people to utilize, like the Google suite of products. So there are three DLP categories, which a lot of people aren't aware of. There is business, non-business, and then blocked connectors. And the names are kind of meaningless. Not the blocked one, obviously, that's pretty clear. But the business connectors and the non-business connectors, really, it doesn't matter which one you use, but the idea is when you put something in one of those boxes, it can only be used with connectors that are also in that box. So the recommendation from Microsoft is you use that business category for sensitive data, and the non-business, data connectors, and the non-business for non-sensitive data. Or you can put your non-blockable Microsoft connectors that you don't really want people using very much. You can pop those there. But I could also put all of my connectors that involve sensitive data into non-business if I'm feeling cheeky, but they work the same way. They're just two separate boxes. So it's not like one helps protect sensitive information better than the other. And then blocked connectors cannot be used at all by anyone. And I do recommend setting this as the default for, like I said, the new connectors in especially your default environment. So I've got a little chart here to help kind of illustrate these three different boxes. The most obvious one, so I have Facebook as an example. Let's say Facebook is in blocked. I cannot use Facebook with the SharePoint connectors. I can't use it with Salesforce connector. I can't use it with the Outlook.com connector, and I can't use it. I can't use it with Facebook connector. I can't use it at all. It's totally blocked in that particular environment, whichever environment you've assigned it to. Now, let's say I have SharePoint and Salesforce in the business connector category. And again, those could also be in non-business as well. I can use in the same app and flow SharePoint and Salesforce together. So if you're a Salesforce org, this would make sense for you. Outlook.com, let's say I put that one in non-business just because maybe it's non-blockable, or because I can't remember off the top of my head if it is blockable, but if I put it in non-business, I can build a flow that uses the Outlook.com connector, but I can't use it in conjunction with the SharePoint connector or the Salesforce connector or any connector that is in the business category. Um, yeah, so I think that about covers it. So non-business doesn't mean blocked. It just means I can't pair it with things in the business connector category. All right, so that's DLP policies. This is my least favorite part, which is trying to teach people about security roles, but buckle up. And if you have questions about this, you know, good luck, because security roles are not my forte, and I'm pretty rusty on them because I'm not a Power Platform admin anymore. But we're going to give it a shot because they are very important to know about. So they basically answer one simple question: what is this person allowed to do in this environment? So they're assigned to users based on their responsibilities and their needs, least access necessary. And you can ensure that users have access to resources by using security roles, but that they don't have access to sensitive information, unauthorized information. Um, so they make sure that people have the right level of access, no more, no less. There are some basic security roles you need to know, because if you've ever looked in Power Platform Admin Center and looked at the list of security roles, it's very overwhelming. So these are the main ones that you need to know, because and there's obviously going to be niche cases, but you can use Copilot and say, hey, help me figure out why I would need this particular role or this particular role. So environment or system admin, some of these depend on whether or not you have Dataverse enabled. So if you've got no Dataverse, then you're using that environment, those first two here. And if you are using Dataverse, you're using kind of the last three here. So I'll back up here. Environment admin, that's going to be full control of the environment. So be very careful who you give that out to. Environment maker does sound a little misleading. It sounds like it allows them to make whatever they want, including make environments, but it just allows them to build stuff, to build apps and flows in that environment. System customizer, that's going to be involved with the custom table data. So basically it controls how the data model itself is built in that environment. Some key points with that one is that they can create and edit tables, fields, relationships. They can see all of your custom data if you give them that system customizer role. But on some of the core tables, unless you've paired it with some other roles, it doesn't give them totally carte blanche on what they're doing. So it is powerful, but it's only going to be a powerful role in a Dataverse heavy environment. If you're not really utilizing Dataverse that much, it's not going to affect that much. Your basic user is going to be your run your app and do your job kind of role. So if you've got apps that you just need for people to be able to run and use, then basic user is the role that they need to be assigned. And then the approvals admin and user roles are one thing I had to learn about the hard way. That's basically, that role exists so that Microsoft approvals work. If you've ever used those, I have a whole session on those, because I just love seeking your approval, which is what the session is called. But if you want to utilize approvals in a new environment, you do need to assign those roles. If you can't figure out why approvals aren't going through, it may be a security role issue. All right, so let's go through all these animations here. Boop, boop, boop. Security groups, that is how we stop governance from becoming accidental. So they control who can even enter an environment. So if you do not have a security group in front of an environment, people can see it. That doesn't mean they can do things in it. That because if they don't have a security role, they can't go to your Dataverse tables, for example. But if we don't lock it down with a security group, they can still see that environment, which you may not want. It's for a variety of reasons. It can be overwhelming. It can uh, show maybe something sensitive, the existence of an environment that you don't want people to know about. But mostly it's just overwhelming. And then security roles are going to control what they're doing once inside. So together, they prevent everyone from being auto added to every environment. They prevent over permissioning. And one metaphor that helps me is think of security groups as the door, and security roles is what you're allowed to do and touch once you're inside that room. Woo! All right. So when you're implementing security groups, um, they again ensure that users are not automatically added to an environment. Security roles are about least privilege, so giving people um, exactly what they need to be successful and nothing extra. And then you can, for your security groups, use M365 groups. You can use Azure security groups most commonly. The M365 groups are mailbox enabled, so that can be a perk of those. Check out Michael Roth's blog at michaelroth42.com if you want everything you could ever have wanted to know about security roles and groups that I have not helped you with. And then the last pillar is going to be the Center of Excellence Starter Kit, which really confused me. Uh, just the concept, because I'm hearing that Center of Excellence is a concept, it's a thing, and then I'm hearing, okay, but wait, this is an actual thing. This is an actual product that I can install. So at its essence, it's something that was developed by the PowerCat team and maintained by them. It's a bunch of apps and flows that other people have built already for you that allow you to help see what's going on in your Power Platform environments. Is it going to be around forever? Probably not, because managed environments, they are putting more and more into managed environments, but there are still some things that aren't in managed environments yet and that I like to use the COE starter kit for. And if you're at a nonprofit, if you're at a government org, there's just places where you can't afford to use managed environments. So I do still think that the COE starter kit has a place, which is why I talk about it. It allows you to help set up DLP permissions more easily, set app and flow permissions on every app and flow in your tenant. And it expands your monitoring, your visibility into what your makers are doing in your tenant. It does come bundled in a solution, so it's a relatively easy install. It used to be a much more complicated install, and then they came up with a setup wizard for it, so it's significantly easier. And you can also expand on the basic core component solution, so there are different add-ons that you can add. Plus, you can't, so some of those add-ons are governance components, like requesting makers to justify their business use cases for an app or a flow, app quarantine and inactivity notifications. But I don't recommend turning those on in your development environment because then you might have 2,200 unread emails. Whoops. Not that I'm speaking from experience. There are nurture components. I don't really use these, but they allow you to send out surveys, training in a day templates, newsletter capabilities. There are theming components and then application lifecycle management components. The only downside is it does take a while to install, especially the first time. So you do have to be a little patient. You might be wondering, okay, Lindsay, why do we not just use the Power Platform Admin Center? And this is maybe a controversial, take, but I think of the Power Platform Admin Center in terms of analytics, not in terms of what you can do in it, because obviously you can do a ton in it, especially with the new experience that's been launched. But in terms of analytics, it's kind of like a baby. You can see some things and they're kind of cute and it's whatever. But the COE starter kit analytics are just full grown. They're much more expansive to me. I know Power Platform Admin Center, they're working on it, but as of right now, I just prefer the analytics in the COE starter kit. So I've got some example screenshots for you from COE starter kit here. Um, and I've got some things blocked out just because it's got people's names on it. But I'm able to see, for example, in this Power Platform admin view, and these are just all apps and flows that are, again, built by the PowerCat team from Microsoft that you can also go in and customize if you are feeling adventurous. So I'm able to see who are my top makers. So this is how I would be able to identify, oh, I've got maybe some shadow IT going on that I want to look into. You can look at your active environments by number of apps and number of flows, and you can see my dedicated environment for the COE and the dev COE are obviously the most popular in terms of apps because I don't build a ton of apps because I prefer flows. Personal productivity has a bunch of stuff in it, including 190 flows that may need to be cleaned up, may need to be locked down. And then I can see a couple other environments here. You can also go in and get some Power BI views. So I'm able to see, okay, I've got standard premium connectors being used in my different apps and my different flows. I can see the total sum of the number of flows, the number of apps, the number of active connectors. I can actually see, so this map is pretty boring just because this my org wasn't a remote org, it was just a Kansas City based org. But you can even see by a map where your makers are at if you enable and configure it right. And again, I'm able to see who are my top flow makers. So my service accounts, well, actually, I'm the top flow maker in this screenshot. So humble brag. I'm able to see my top environments by flow count. And this is all just in a nice dashboard. I'm able to see, this one's really cool, Power Platform Compliance and Governance Dashboard. And the COE Starter Kit can be overwhelming. That's why I just have some screenshots for you. But I'm able to see things like, okay, there are 15 flows that I have using HTTP actions. So those might have plain text passwords in them. They're making API calls that I may not want them to be making. I'm able to see that I've got flows with duplicate names. That might be a place that I want to do some cleanup. I can see that I've got 155 apps that haven't been launched in the last quarter. Again, places opportunities for maybe for some cleanup, some spring cleaning. I can even see how many apps and flows I have with demo or test or things like that in the name, which again could be opportunities for Lindsay to go clean up her dev environment. You've also got some adoption insights. So you're able to see, for example, what are your top connectors being used. So for me, this is comforting because the top connectors are all Microsoft connectors in this case. It's not like I'm a Microsoft org and the Google suite, one of those connectors is the top one being used because that indicates a security problem. I can also see my default environment tech debt. So I can see how many flows are using plain text passwords in my default environment, how many flows are orphaned or apps that are orphaned. What are there any apps and flows that are shared with everyone? Because if it's shared with everyone, it's probably potentially something that the whole business is using and therefore something that you would want to have it in its own environment with some more visibility on it. This is the Manage Permissions Center. So this is where you're able to go into all of the apps and flows by environment. I can also search by owner. I can also just filter by orphaned flows and orphaned apps. And this is really useful for, I hear someone's leaving, I want to help them off board, or someone has left and I need to help clean up what they've left behind. And I'm able to go in and click on any of these and go able to get edit access to the flow if I have my Power Platform admin access. I can also, this is something we just used in my current org, which is the DLP policy impact analysis. So what you basically do with this one is you build out, it looks just like the Power Platform Admin Center at first, where you are building out a DLP policy, you're saying apply it to these environments or exclude it from these environments, but then you get this impact analysis. So you can see if I were to turn this DLP policy on, right now, I would have 82 flows that would be impacted, meaning they would stop working, and I would have 5 apps that would be impacted or stop working. So we just implemented a tenant-wide block list. We had 70 something users affected, and so we were able to use this email template, and we ended up turning it into our own automation so that we could tell people which apps and flows were going to be the non-compliant ones, but you can use just the one that's built in the COE starter kit, customize that text, and then you can send out emails to your makers and say, hey, you've got 2 weeks to clean this up. Here's some documentation about what's going on. Requirements for the COE. So this one's important. Licenses were the biggest hurdle for my nonprofit. So each account that works with the COE's apps needs Power Apps, Power Automate per user license, or depending on how many people you want working with the COE starter kit, it might be cheaper to do a Power Apps per app license for each
Um,
separate COE app.
Lindsay, I think there's just a comment there, if that's right. Um, isn't it better to assign service principals as owners of environments to prevent orphan flow or apps when someone leaves the organization?
As owners of environments,
Yeah, so I'll just read it again. Isn't it better to assign service principals as owners of environments to prevent orphan flows or apps when someone leaves the organization?
it is for your it depends. It depends on if this is like a service account situation, if this is something that a lot of people in the org are using, or is this something that just a small team is using. But yes, in general, that's going to help prevent that orphaned issue. Series Starter Kit's more about helping you go clean up what's already been orphaned without you realizing it potentially. Does that answer the question?
Yeah,
Okay, great.
yeah.
So your admin requirements, you do need for your COE admin account, and I personally use a service account for this. Power Apps, Power Automate per user license. It cannot be under a trial. You do need an M365 license for that service account, or regular account, but I recommend a service account. And this was the hardest part for my nonprofit, for my admins, because it needed to have either Power Platform Service Admin or Global Tenant Admin, not behind PIM or Privileged Identity Management, where you go into the Azure portal and you say, turn this on for 8 hours. And that the reason behind that is there are flows that are running in the background constantly. And so you can't, it's not realistic for you to be going and pimming in every 8 hours, every 4 hours, and because your flows are just, you're going to eventually miss one, and then your flows aren't going to run properly. So you do have to talk very nicely to your admins, and allow them to help you get at least Power Platform Service Admin. I wouldn't recommend Global Admin in general. And then it does have to also be mailbox enabled. It is recommended that you give the COE starter kit its own environment. If you plan on customizing the COE starter kit in any way, it's also recommended to have a development COE environment or a test COE environment. When you're setting it up, make it a production environment. Do include a database. You don't need to include the sample apps and data. Don't necessarily need to restrict it with a security group. That's up to you. If you are nervous about setting up the COE starter kit, I recommend Manuela Pilcher has videos that I followed before there was a setup wizard. And I believe she has updated ones that walk you through step by step how to go and set it up. But there is a setup wizard, which makes things significantly easier. There are usually monthly updates to deploy. I recommend just subscribing, following the GitHub repo. You get the emails every month. It is recommended that you update the Seaway Starter Kit at least every 3 months, or else things are going to start to break. So you don't have to do the monthly updates, but it's best to just get in a cadence to do the monthly updates. All right, let's go into some tips and tricks and pitfalls. Manuela Pilcher is the name. I will type that into the chat. And I see all the other questions. I will get to them as soon as I am done with this tips and tricks and pitfalls section. So one of the tips that I recommend, there is on Microsoft Learn documentation, a SharePoint template you can use PowerShell to deploy, which just creates a SharePoint communication site that is a Power Platform hub. You don't have to use this template. It's totally optional, but it's nice because what it does is it sets up a one-stop shop for your makers to figure out everything that you want them to know about the Power Platform. So this is what it looks like when you have not customized it at all. So it has this getting started section, help and learning, totally customizable. You can go into any of these pages and edit or delete them. All of those things you can go through and see, okay, and so we have something very similar like this set up where it is what are the environment strategies that we have at Epic, my company? What are our DLP policies? And we especially go into like the mail connectors, which can be the trickier ones, how to request a premium license, all of that good stuff. And again, totally editable, totally configurable, but this just helps it so you don't have to start from scratch. Pitfalls, cleaning up can be a lot. We've been working on it for at least a month, and we haven't even gotten to the default DLP policy in my current org, just because that's going to be in the hundreds, if not thousands, of apps and flows that are going to be affected potentially when we implement our more restrictive DLP policy. So it can be a lot, and do think before you click. So don't just go blindly implement a DLP policy because you're going to break people's stuff unless you want to break their stuff. But then you have to deal with the consequences of breaking their stuff, which is angry users. Do consider environment overload. Think before you create an environment. And because too many environments can just be a lot more to manage. It can be confusing for the user. So the least amount of environments possible, but you create the environments you need to create. Like I said, there's no straight, one size fits all answer there. And if you do a good job, people will love the experience. They will have a more satisfying experience with the Power Platform. It could, so do a good job. Never half-ass two things, whole-ass one thing. Really just take some time to go in and take care of this stuff. Because what I have found several years later, my biggest takeaways is that once that governance is set up and you've done all of this work, it's there's not that much you need to do on a daily basis, depending on the size of your org, other than reviewing your dashboards, depending on the adoption levels. Adoption can be a slow process, but it is very rewarding. That's the most rewarding part of my job, is working with makers and having them come back excited and tell me, oh my gosh, I figured out this new flow. I figured out how to please check out this app that I just built. It's very satisfying. And do make sure, if you can, have an open point person for people to go to, or at least a center of excellence, Power Platform hub, something like that, so that people know where to go with their questions about Power Platform. All right. So that is what I've got for you. Let's go ahead and answer some questions.
Yeah. Do
So
you want me to read them out, or
let's
what would you like to do?
scroll here.
So the next one to answer
Okay, so I
is,
see one from when organizations adopt Power Platform without governance, it often leads to shadow IT and chaos. For companies that have never implemented governance before, how can you establish an initial governance framework that feels necessary and supported, focused on enabling users rather than being perceived as bureaucracy? Whew, that could be a whole session in and of itself. That's a tough one. But that's a great question. The way that we are trying to explain it to our users currently in our org is we understand our users understand the importance of cybersecurity and security concerns. And so we're just trying to say, listen, there's some security, loopholes that have been around that we're just trying to clean up. If you have a valid use case, if you have a business use case, talk to us about it. So don't be super rigid. Like we were going to block Twitter in our tenant block policy, and then someone came to us with a valid use case. And so what we did was we said, okay, well, now we've discovered an app that you said a team is, or a flow that a team is relying on. So let's go ahead and move this to a dedicated environment, and then have a different DLP policy that does allow Twitter connections for that environment. They were doing something cool like ingesting threat analysis information, something like that. Is there a certain app or flow in the COE kit that can help with app usage info? Yes. So to figure out, I don't know for sure on model-driven apps. That's a great question. Because we did not have very many model-driven apps in my last org. But yes, so the Power Platform Admin Center is great. I recommend just give yourself an afternoon, give yourself a day to go in, and when you're in the COE starter kit, filter down by apps in that solution, and then just go and click play and go explore those apps. There's also a Power BI dashboard that is excellent that I would recommend getting set up. And there's lots of information online about how to get that set up. And that's going to give you a ton of good analytics on who's using what. Tips or ideas on how to bridge the gap between IT as tenant admin and teams like security when there's clear knowledge gap and the latter just wants to block everything. Yes, that's again a great question. I would say it's about collaboration. It's about yeah, that's a tricky one because we've been given kind of carte blanche from our security and compliance because they didn't really know what was going on in the Power Platform. So we're the ones who are able to go through and say, yeah, we want to lock this down. We want to block a lot of things. I don't have a great answer for that one. I feel free to reach out to me, and I on LinkedIn or via email, and we can kind of discuss it further. Because I just haven't had to deal with that a ton. It's been more, hey, you want to lock stuff down? Great, please go do that. We didn't know that this was a problem. Doesn't the COE need to be registered as an app in Azure? It's been a while since I've installed a fresh one, but I do believe that yes, you do have to have an app reg for the COE starter kit. I would recommend asking. So there's also, I will try to find it. If I, no, I will put on my link tree a link to the WhatsApp group for Power Platform Governance. That is a good place to ask things like that in. So I'll update my link tree after this session in just a few minutes. Do you find the DLP editor good for testing DLP policies? Yes, so the DLP editor in Power Platform Admin Center, no, because it doesn't tell you what it's going to break. The data impact analysis app in the COE starter kit I find invaluable because that does tell you what's going to break. And then you can go back to the DLP editor in the Power Platform Admin Center and decide, okay, I'm ready to implement this now because I've warned my makers. I've done the cleanup that needs to be done. When should you use managed environments? uh, my answer or the Microsoft answer? If you are, so for us, we're a big global org. We use managed environments very heavily because there are some really awesome, cool features. The problem is you do need to license everyone in a managed environment. And I had hoped to avoid talking about licensing, but here we are. um, the cost considerations are it's at least in the US, 15-ish dollars per user per month to get them that licensing. But there are a ton of features, and I will tell you that is going to be, from my understanding, the future versus the COE starter kit being something that's going to exist forever and forever and forever. So it's, I think, worth the investment. But if you are just getting started and you're also trying to prove out how much, what's being used, how much is going on, then the COE starter kit's just a good starter point. All right. Oh, yes. My QR. Oh, what did I just click? My QR code for my LinkedIn, I will put up. So that's my contact information. And let me go back and find the screen here. Let's see, what have I missed? Shadow IT is like the dark arts of Hogwarts. Always finding something new, disruptive, and edgy. Bringing those creators into the fold would be beneficial. How to magnetize that creativity? I recommend a champions program personally. And so, like, for example, in our Copilot champions meetings that we have weekly, I have a champion go and do a demo at the end of each meeting of something that they're building with Copilot, something, an agent that they've built, prompt use case examples that they use, and let them show off that creativity and inspire other people in the org to do cool stuff. So feel free to reach out to me to talk more about champions programs. I'm very excited and passionate about them. But I recommend a champions program to try and enable and empower your power users. How can you manage a huge amount of DLPs? I recommend that is a longer question than I have time to answer right now. A huge amount of DLPs, I would email me or message me on LinkedIn and we can talk more about that once I have more information from you, Francisco. Oh, I can
Perfect.
see purview for DLP management. Excellent. I haven't played with that. So I don't pretend to know everything. We are at time,
Yep.
but feel free, please, to reach out to me, connect with me on LinkedIn, send me an email. I am moving this week, so my week is a little insane, but if I don't get back to you right away, I will get back to you, I promise. And thank you all so much for your time and for listening and being an excellent audience.
Amazing. So, on behalf of the ESPC community, we'd like to extend a big thank you to you again, Lindsay, for taking time out to take out this webinar. Really appreciate it. So that's the end of
Pleasure. Yeah,
today's.
it was my pleasure.
Thank you so much. So that's the end of
Thank
today's
you.
webinar. You can find this webinar and more at sharepointeurope.com/research center. Thanks again for all of you for joining us today. I hope you join us again soon. Take care.